BP added more than $70 billion to the U.S. economy in 2022. Investments like acquiring America's largest biogas producer, Archaea Energy, and starting up new infrastructure in the Gulf of Mexico. It's and, not or. See what doing both means for energy nationwide at bp.com/investing in America.
Have you heard? You can listen to your gripping investigations ad-free. Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app or visit amazon.com/truecrime ad-free. That's amazon.com/truecrime ad-free. And catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Content warning, this episode contains discussion of murder, suicide, and the sexual abuse of children. So today we're going to talk about a number of different cases inside and outside of Indiana. We'll be talking about the Delphi murders case, as well as a recent catfishing online predator case that happened in Hamilton County, Indiana, along with a domestic violence case turned homicide that happened in the same county. Then we're going to be heading to California for a series of suicides that have been linked to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and a mass shooting that occurred recently in Maine, and 2 cases involving a conspiracy to commit murder out of Florida.
So we're going all over the place. So let's get started.
My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases. We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is The Cheat Sheet. Catfishing and Conspiracies.
Let's start with the Delphi case. Russ McQuaid and the team over at Fox 59 has been all over the story about Judge Gull's health. Judge Fran Gull has been hospitalized.
Yes. Obviously, this is pretty serious if she's being hospitalized. And it's interesting. It's been a bit of an open secret for a while now that she has not been in court for some time.
Including she's missed drug court.
Which, as you know, if you listen to the profile episodes on her, that's very important to her. And so the fact that she's been gone has been noted by different reporters who are, you know, like Russ McQuaid, who are saying, how do we figure out what's happening here? So he was able to get the scoop on getting Allen County to comment that she has been out and has been hospitalized. So obviously, this is a pretty serious situation. Our thoughts go out to her and her family. Hopefully she can be feeling better soon and get back to the courtroom.
Something like this also tends to reveal something about people and how they respond to it. A lot of the people online who have been critical of the way she's handled the case have not been kind in their responses to this.
Oh, I am so shocked about that. Wow. It's interesting because I think you and I have been pretty critical about elements of ousting the defense and wanting this to be more transparent and wanting other elements of the case to be more transparent. But at the end of the day, people are people. And if someone is dealing with some sort of illness or medical issue, then that, you know, you don't need to get nasty about something like that. And the rhetoric around Delphi has just been so bad for so long. It's actually, you wonder where these people are coming from. I know that it's so easy to get wrapped up in like a debate or a attitude online and perhaps take it too far. I understand how that happens a few times. I don't really understand how you basically become a horrible person in service of just some online theory. I think there's an element to Delphi where people find these communities they want to fit in by getting nastier and nastier, and it spirals out of control. But like, everyone's an adult here. So I think certain creators and certain people who are very vocal in this case should probably start acting like it.
And one thing that strikes me is that some of the nastiness seems to be in the surface of something that's more than a little misguided.
Yeah, I mean, when you're rejoicing about somebody's mother and grandmother falling ill, then that, I think it is fair to qualify that as nasty. And I think some of this is, and we've been seeing this for some time actually, there's an element in this case that conflates Richard Allen with the old defense team, namely Andrew Baldwin and Bradley Rosie. And anything good for them must be good for him. Anything bad for them must be bad for him. And I think that's understandable, especially when you're in a trial, because obviously the defense attorneys are representing their client. But in this pretrial chaotic mess, I sort of think that it's possible to buy a theory of Allen's innocence and also be pretty skeptical of some of the actions of the old defense. It's also possible to buy a theory of Allen's innocence and be concerned about the new defense. I don't think we need to necessarily, though, conflate either support of the new defense or the old defense with support of Richard Allen, or even having open-mindedness towards Richard Allen and the theory of his innocence. So I think people need to try to separate those. I think that is unhelpful when you're basically couching your support or lack thereof of the defendant in this case with one set of attorneys or another. Mostly it seems to be happening with the old defense. They've cultivated quite a following. I mean, we've seen that, and that's understandable. But I think you can be saying, well, I don't think that what they're doing is good strategically or is necessarily like super ethical. You can have criticisms of them and still hold space in your mind for Allen being innocent. But one thing that it's possible to do is be critical of attorneys who you don't necessarily feel are representing someone's best interest at a certain point.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we talk a lot about that small portion of the Delphi online community that engages in negative behavior. And the vast majority of the members of the online community surrounding the case actually engage in positive behavior. They have interesting discussions, constructive dialogues, and some of them even go out and do small bits of investigation on their own that are worth noting.
Yes. So this latest comes from Justice Serve Daily. She is a YouTuber who FOIA'd, or rather filed a records request with Miami County. And she obtained the guest, well, to back it up a little bit, we previously got the commissary and store purchases by Kegan Kline from March 2nd, 2022 to September 2nd, 2022. And we also got his guest and visitor logs for that same time period. So our friend JSD requested more Kline records. She wanted them from the visitor records from July 1st, 2022 and March 31st, 2023. And she got those. And what she found was that, and she was kind enough to send them to us, she found that there were 97 visits from a woman Kegan Kline identified as his romantic partner, as well as 3 additional visits. Notably, perhaps the most notable thing is that there's nothing in that time period about visits between him and Jerry Anthony or Tony Kline. So his father was not visiting him in that time period. A few other people were, but it was really 97 of those was mostly just a romantic partner, essentially. And we just want to commend JSD for doing this. I think it's so valuable to have creators like her and just everyday citizens requesting records. And, you know, we don't have to speculate all the time. Sometimes we can just figure it out and get that data, get that hard data. And I think that's such a wonderful thing. And she's just a wonderful person. You should absolutely check out her YouTube. She's just...
What's the name of her YouTube?
It's called Justice Serve Daily. I'll link to it in the show notes. She's super sweet, super cool, and she does a lot of really good work exposing child sexual abuse materials, issues, and protecting kids online. So we salute her.
She's a great person. You were actually on her show fairly recently.
I was. You ditched us because you were busy doing, I think, editing for an episode that had like broken 5 minutes before we were supposed to go on. But me and her were there. We were talking about you. No, I'm just kidding. She's great though. So just check her out. And thanks again to her for giving us that data on Kegan Kline. And if you all have any FOIA needs or want to talk about strategies, you can always shoot us an email and let us know, because we're happy to help talk people through some of that if we can help. Sometimes there's certain caveats to records requests that is just, not going to work out, unfortunately, sometimes, especially in Indiana.
But it's usually worth trying because sometimes you can get surprised. And it's interesting how much information you can get from a records request. You may remember a few months ago, Anya and I, with the help of Shay Hughes, filed a record request in the Delphi case that got 118 documents released.
Well, that was really, that's less of a records request, wasn't it? You filed into the case.
Yes.
So you have to be a lawyer to do that, obviously. But there's certainly things you can do that don't rise to that level and that everyday citizens can do, whether you're a journalist or you're just somebody who wants to know about something that's going on in your community.
Speaking of Kegan Kline, there is another offender out there who in some ways reminds me a little bit of Kegan Kline.
Yeah, there's some Kegan Kline elements to this situation, and I'll break down the basics. So we're talking about a 20-year-old man named Benjamin Owen Rollo, and he was arrested and charged with the following crimes: child molestation, child exploitation / child pornography, child solicitation, disseminating of matter harmful to a minor, and inappropriate communication with a child. This is a man who is alleged to have used the app Snapchat to meet and lure girls, young underage girls. So he's 19 and 20, and we're talking about girls that are 13, 14, 11. And it's a pretty upsetting story. It's out of Hamilton County, Indiana, specifically Westfield. And we read the PCA from Detective Leanne Carter there. And this investigation began on December 3rd, 2022. This all kicked off when a person who the detectives refer to as minor victim number 1, a 12-year-old, she was punished and her mother took her phone. Examining the phone, the mother found messages where her daughter talked about being sexually assaulted. This child disclosed rape to other children, other friends. And this occurred on July 22nd, 2022. 2 girls, the victim number 1, and minor witness number 1, who is 13, are at a sleepover, and they sneak out of her bedroom window to meet with a boy that minor witness number 1 was talking to on Snapchat. He was supposed to be, I believe, younger. But it turned out that, I think he said he was 18, but he later on said he was 23. In reality, I believe he was either 19 or 20. He took the girls in his car and then had the witness sit outside the car while he sexually assaulted the other girl. And they kind of did not say anything. The victim actually told, as I mentioned, other children who in some cases urged her to tell her parents or tell the police. And she indicated that she did not want to because she was scared she was going to get in trouble for sneaking out. And the investigation into this revealed that Rollo was in fact on Snapchat talking with many girls between 11 and 15. And he would send them explicit images of himself. He would get explicit images of them and videos of them. And on November 10th, 2023, he was arrested. He was arrested in actually West Lafayette, Indiana. And his laptop, iPhone were seized. In a subsequent interview, he admitted to having sex with at least one victim, a different victim. and estimated that he had 1,000 images of young girls on his phone. So this whole thing is obviously incredibly disturbing and upsetting. Rollo seems to be a bit more acting in person if these allegations are true. He's going out and meeting girls. Kegan Kline was accused of often asking girls where they were, asking for addresses, asking for locations. But there's less evidence to indicate that he was going around and actually doing sexual assaults himself. That's not something he was ever convicted for. And so it's different, but it's still, you're seeing a young man, a predator who is very knowledgeable about how social media works, manipulating young girls and young children to do what he wants using social media. And I guess we've talked to people who are experts in dealing with these issues. And one thing that often is said is that, parents are at a disadvantage because technology is constantly changing. It's hard to keep up with, even if you're trying to keep up with it. And the best thing you can do is establish a relationship with your teenager or preteen where they feel like they can talk to you about this stuff. And if somebody is being creepy with them, they feel like they can tell you and they're not going to be punished. So it might be tempting if an 11-year-old says to you, oh, I was on Snapchat and this, 20-year-old man was creeping on me. It might be tempting for you to be like, okay, no more phones, no more internet. But if you're doing that, that's punishing your child when the person who is the perpetrator is the one to be punished. And if you're basically punishing your child in that situation, it might make them less likely to come forward. So letting them know if someone's doing something creepy, you can talk to me about it. You can be open with me about it. You're not going to be in trouble, but we're going to try to deal with this person before he hurts somebody else. I just think that openness, because unfortunately, with the advent of the internet and cell phones and social media, these predators could get to any child who has a phone. And that's a really scary thought for parents. But I think what do you think in terms of how to deal with that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense as a way for parents to try to foster those kind of relationships with their kids. I'm also interested in how the legal system can deal with this. It was encouraging that in the Kegan Kline case, the prosecutors down in Peru, Indiana, Miami County, Indiana, were able to prepare arguments, like in the Kiefer brief, which were able to get Kegan Kline, frankly, a much longer sentence than many expected. Often these sorts of offenders get little more than a slap on the wrist.
Yes. I think it's really important for there to be stringent sentences associated with these kinds of crimes because, the predator preying on these young children, it's just, I think most people in society would agree that that's pretty horrifying and that should be taken seriously. And that should come with severe consequences if a person is convicted. Let's stay in Hamilton County and talk about a case that we covered not so long ago. This is the case of Kayla Farmer. She's a woman, a mother who was murdered by her ex-husband at a gas station in Fishers. Fishers is a city to the north of Indianapolis. And the perpetrator was Joshua Farmer. He had a history of domestic violence against her. And this could be a death penalty case, is our understanding, because she was going to be a witness against him in some of the domestic abuse. He had previously put a gun to her head in front of their children. He'd hit his kids that he shared with her, hit her, and he killed her before she could hold him accountable by testifying against him.
So the update is we have a trial date in this case. When is that trial date?
It's been pushed back to October 7th, 2024.
Why is it being pushed back so far?
Well, this is the defendant, Joshua Farmer's request. He wants a longer than normal continuance of the trial date because there is so much discovery for him and his team to unpack. So they basically said, hey, can we push it back a lot? And the judge was like, sure, no worries. So that's the update there. Nothing big, but we are kind of continuing to monitor that a bit.
Here at the Murder Sheet, we work on the podcast and our investigative reporting full time. That means we sometimes don't have time to meticulously plan and cook delicious and nutritious meals. So, in this new year, we are eternally grateful to our sponsor, Factor.
Now's a great time to try out ready-to-eat meal delivery service Factor. Remember, when you support our great sponsors like Factor, you're supporting us and our ability to keep doing this work. So please consider visiting factormeals.com/msheet50 and use code msheet50 to get 50% off.
Factor allows you to pop your ready-made meal into the microwave. In 2 minutes flat, you'll have a hot and ready dish with minimal cleanup afterward. It's just that simple.
Also, this food is awesome. I recently dug their black bean and rice enchilada bowl with roasted zucchini, corn, and salsa verde. It tasted so fresh and flavorful.
I love that we get to skip meal prep, the grocery stores, expensive to-go orders, and elaborate cleanup. Plus, there's plenty of options for extra picky eaters like me.
We've really been thrilled with Factor, and we feel you will be too if you're striving to eat healthy and save time in 2024. It's really helped me meet my nutritional goals for the new year.
Head to factormeals.com/msheet50 and use code msheet50 to get 50% off. That's code msheet50 at factormeals.com/msheet50 to get 50% off. Another interesting story out there is a situation going on out in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we're going to the West now.
Where there were 4 suicides of current and former personnel in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department.
Yes. We're not going to read any of their names, although some of them are out there. But I think a lot of people understandably were like, is this connected somehow? We're not seeing any indication that that is the case yet. But I think that seems like an extraordinarily high number for a small, short time span.
Is it unusual for law enforcement personnel to commit suicide?
Well, unfortunately, I was looking into this about what this says in a wider context. Law enforcement officials and personnel tend to be far more susceptible to suicide than the rest of the population. As much as you want to look at something like this and see, oh my gosh, there must be some conspiracy, or they were all in on something together, or they're not suicides, this is a cover-up. I think it probably ends up speaking more to just general trends with this kind of thing that's important to be aware of, and is also, again, very concerning.
Do they know why there's such an elevated risk? Is it something to do with the combination of the stress of the job combined with access to weapons?
I don't know. And that's such a good question. I know that there's been more efforts in suicide prevention. But the interesting thing is what the Boston University findings were, what they kind of compiled a lot of existing research, is that it's far worse at smaller departments. It's actually way worse the smaller the department is in terms of the rate of suicide. So actually, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, because it's large, it's not one of the ones that you would have thought would be more at risk in the context of wider departments. So I think that may speak to more resources are available at the larger departments, and that may not be existing at the smaller department level. And yeah, I think there's probably a myriad of reasons why this is the case, but I'm not aware of that. I'd be interested if anyone out there has researched this or can speak to it, or has worked in the suicide prevention side of things with law enforcement. That would be, I think, a great interview to have to kind of explore that issue a little more.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this topic. Now, though, Anya, the travel agent, has us going all the way from California to the eastern seaboard in Maine.
Actually, a listener requested us talk about the situation in Los Angeles County, and a listener requested us to talk about that we talk about this case, which is an awful, awful shooting that occurred in Lewiston, Maine on October 25th, 2023. And the perpetrator was a 40-year-old man named Robert Card. He targeted 2 businesses, Just in Time Recreation, bowling alley, and Shemengi's Bar and Grill restaurant. And 18 people died in this shooting. And one thing that differentiated this situation from a lot of other cases is that in most mass shootings, or at least a lot of the high profile ones, the shooter dies by suicide immediately, or is shot by the police immediately, or surrenders immediately. But in this case, there was a multi-day manhunt because he fled the scenes and was able to get away for some time. He was later found dead by suicide in a kind of truck trailer situation at a recycling plant where he previously worked. Another notable thing about this is that he was with the 3rd Battalion, 304th Infantry Regiment, and that was an important aspect of this because his superiors and fellow members of that regiment were becoming increasingly concerned with his behavior.
What were they seeing?
His family also took steps and reported this. His ex-wife and his son were concerned. So a lot of different people were sounding the alarm on his mental health. He had recently gotten some sort of hearing aids and was suspecting that people, specifically people at the businesses where he shot, where he killed people, were broadcasting rumors about him being a pedophile. So obviously, not a rational person, not somebody who's of sound mind, because that doesn't make any sense. But he was talking about shooting people. He was talking about shooting up places. And he punched somebody who asked him to stop talking about that, who was somebody who was in the regiment with him. He was held at the Keller Army Community Hospital for psychological evaluation and then sent to Four Winds Psychiatric Hospital in Katona, New York. But unfortunately, none of this helped, and he ultimately went on to commit a really heinous. And I guess what scares me about this story is that he shoots up the bowling alley. In 4 minutes, police are there. 7 people are already dead. In 4 minutes from the first call, police are there. Then at the restaurant, police are there within 2 minutes. And there's 8 people dead. So it's just striking that when you have someone who is motivated, has access to weapons, and knows how to use them, the devastation can be extremely quick, and having law enforcement respond relatively quickly within minutes doesn't matter. There's no saving anybody. And of course, as with many mass shootings, the internet was rife with misinformation in the immediate aftermath. I actually remember looking on some social media and videos were going around purporting to be him surrendering. And those turned out to be bunk. So just as a reminder for all of us, including fellow journalists and creators and whatnot, that there are bad actors out there who will just put out nonsense to get clicks. And so we should just be aware of that. When the situation is ongoing, it's best to wait for the credible news outlets to report something than to assume something based on this random guy on Twitter put it out there. I think it may be worth now going all the way down the eastern seaboard to Florida.
And recently there have been developments in the case involving the death of Dan Markle. This was a law school professor, respected law school professor who was murdered.
Yeah, he was very respected. He went to Harvard undergrad, got his JD at Harvard, did white-collar criminal defense, and was a tenured professor at the Florida State University College of Law.
He was murdered in his driveway back in 2014. And police actually said relatively early on in the process that they believed it was a contract killing. And since then, they have been working hard at unraveling this and getting all of the parties that are responsible. And they've been going at it in a smart way. When there's a conspiracy like this, you don't want to go to the inside of the conspiracy right away. You want to start at the outside and gradually work your way closer and closer to the center. And that's what they've been doing.
Yeah. And is that why murder conspiracy cases sometimes can be quite complicated and take a long time to wrap up?
Yes.
Because it's not just one person doing something. You have to prove all the links.
Yes. It's very complicated and very time consuming because you want to make sure you do it absolutely correctly. There is double jeopardy considerations. You want to make sure that if you're going to go and charge someone, that you're ready to go into court with evidence that proves that that person, beyond a reasonable doubt, is guilty of the offense with which you're charging them.
Also, if you miss a domino, if it's a series of dominoes, like a spiral of dominoes, if you miss a domino, then you may not get other people down the line. So the stakes are not just we need to kind of get everybody as quickly as possible. The stakes are like, we need to do this in the correct order so that everything will keep falling in place as the investigation develops.
Yeah. And so you look at a case like this, and this man was murdered in 2014. And certainly there's a part of you crying out for justice that you want to see the perpetrators arrested immediately. And it's a shame that it's taken so long for this process to work its way out. But the thing to keep in mind is the process is ongoing. No one's given up on the case. They're just slowly piecing it together so that when they get the people responsible in the courtroom, they will be able to get a just verdict.
So let's talk about the contract and let's talk about this conspiracy. You have Markle murdered in 2014. Some context, he was in a bitter custody battle with his wife, Wendy, who is also a lawyer, over their sons. And, they had divorced. She wanted to move the sons to Miami. That's very far away from Tallahassee, where he was based and working. So this is getting nasty. He's shot to death. So first, investigators take down two men, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. They determined that they were the ones who drove up from Miami in a rented Prius to kill him. Cell phone data tied them there. Banking data. They were trailing this guy. And they're convicted. Garcia was tied to a woman named Catherine Magbanoa. So she turns out to have been also romantically connected to Charles Adelson. Charles, or Charlie Adelson, was a successful dentist, and he was the brother of Wendy, Markle's ex-wife. Now, the recent developments have been Charlie Adelson was convicted of murder. Now, Donna Adelson, the mother of Charles and Wendy, has been charged. She was arrested at the Miami airport trying to get to Vietnam, which does not have an extradition treaty. She was arrested and she has been, again, charged in this. So a lot of people have speculated over time that Donna and Wendy were involved in Markle's homicide. The whole family at that point hated him. They wanted to move the kids to Miami to be closer to them. And the theory is that this spiraled into a murder plot. So we'll have to see what happens with Donna's case. But the whole thing is obviously very disturbing. You know what the whole thing also reminds me of?
What's that?
A recent case involving Jared Bridegan and his ex-wife, Shanna Gardner. And so I want to talk about some of the weird similarities with those cases for a minute because I think about it a lot. So Jared Bridegan was murdered in 2022. He had just dropped the twins that he shared with his ex-wife Shanna off at her home, and he was driving back with the child, the 2-year-old he shared with his new wife. Someone put a tire in the road. He gets out to move it. He's shot to death. So then from there, we're seeing kind of a similar situation to the Markle case. A man named Henry Tenon is arrested. He has no connection to Bridegan. Then a man named Mario Fernandez Saldana is arrested. And he's the husband of Bridegan's ex-wife, Shanna Gardner Fernandez. And then she has recently been arrested. So we saw a similar thing. It was quicker, but it was one after the other. people are being arrested who are increasingly closer to the victim. And so what do I mean when I see these cases strike me as having some similarities? Well, you have the nature of the conspiracy. You have people being arrested who are getting increasingly close to the victim. They both occurred in Florida. So Markle was killed in Tallahassee. Wendy, his ex-wife, wanted him to move the kids to Miami, which is like a 7-hour drive away. Bridegan was killed in Jacksonville Beach. Both centered around custody battles over 2 children. Markle and Wendy Adelson shared 2 sons. Bridegan and Gardner shared twins, a boy and a girl. And those custody disputes were getting pretty nasty. In addition to that, both victims were well-liked, very successful, respectable men. Again, Markle was a law professor. Bridegan was a Microsoft executive, so people who seem to be doing pretty well in life. In both instances, in the kind of the couple experiencing some sort of custody dispute, the wife came from a very close-knit family. The Adelsons, so Wendy Adelson, she was from a family, they were successful dentists. Her father, Harvey Adelson, had a lucrative practice in Tamarack, Florida. Donna, his wife, worked with him. Charlie was a very wealthy and periodontist, and he was, considered successful. And in the case of the Gardners, so Shanna comes from a family where they're essentially powerful owners of a multi-level marketing scheme called Stampin' Up. And so her parents are Sterling and Shelley. They have 5 daughters, Sarah, Shanna, Sage, Shaylee, and Megan. And so they were, very interconnected. And in fact, Shanna was at her parents' house when she was arrested. So at this point, there's some differences. There's not really any indication that the Bridegan murder goes beyond Shanna. I'm not seeing any indications that other members of her family are going to be implicated. But it just shows you that a lot of these conspiracies, like, the people think that they're being really smart about it. And, what's striking to me is that, like, both of these seemingly happened over a custody dispute of these children. And it's like looking at these kids is more like property than little human beings who need both parents in their lives. And like the arrogance of doing something like this and depriving them of one parent in such a permanent way is just horrifying.
I agree completely. There's some really interesting parallels there. I believe we're releasing this episode on Thanksgiving. I'd like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Everyone who celebrates.
If you're in Indiana, you may not celebrate Thanksgiving because you may be too busy planning your celebration of Lincoln's birthday, which, as we recently learned, we actually celebrate in Indiana the Friday after Thanksgiving. I know I've gone out and bought my stovepipe hat and my little scroll with the Gettysburg Address on it.
Aw, I could actually see you doing that. That's the thing. That's not a joke.
I'm curious. I mean, you have a history. You like to wreck holidays.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, if you look up like Anya Kane Thanksgiving on Google, as I just did, like one of the first things that comes up is the real history of Thanksgiving is darker than you learned in school. So are you going to figure out a way to wreck everybody's celebration of Lincoln's birthday?
Yes.
What's the dark side of that?
Well, it didn't end so well for him in 1865. Here's the thing, like, I really enjoy history. So when I was at Insider, I used to write these little articles that were kind of like the dark side of different holidays. Like Valentine's Day was one I wrecked. Wrecked Thanksgiving. I don't think I wrecked Christmas. I did some weird stuff about Christmas though, like with different carols. I think anyways, I just enjoy digging into the history of different events, and Thanksgiving does have a pretty dark history considering, the people often tout it as, oh, it's wonderful. The Pilgrims and the Native Americans sat down together and had a nice time. But like within a generation, there was a bloody war between the two groups. Yes. Yeah, well, I just find that fascinating. I love the history, and I I always want to share that with people. So that was one way of me writing about history for Insider, kind of sneaking it in there.
Also, oddly enough, I looked up Anya Kane Thanksgiving. There's her expose of Thanksgiving, and you scroll down, and the next entry on the list is, I tried one of the most infamous gas station sandwiches in America. So apparently you also spoil gas station food for people.
I think that was a Thanksgiving, I think that was the Wawa Thanksgiving sandwich. So, yeah, well, I don't think anyone wants to read about me eating a gas station sandwich. There's something very sordid sounding about that.
So on that note, should we wish you all happy holidays
a lot,
and our sincere apologies.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Thanks so much for listening.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.